Okay, so apologies for kind of hogging the agenda with test stuff. I don't think we need to spend too much time on it though. The first topic is on the Bodo 2 use in S3 tests that is going to block support on newer Python versions. I had discussed this a couple of weeks ago. And the only effort that I made was to just remove all of them. I'm not exactly sure what coverage we're going to lose from this, but my recollection is that the harder stuff to convert was just Bodo 2 sending invalid inputs, expecting so that I could test the server-side validation of parameters, but Bodo 3 does its own parameter validation and so won't let you send those requests in the first place. So I think that stuff, that coverage, that kind of coverage is useful, but maybe maybe we could use fuzzing for that coverage instead. You just mentored a GSOC student to add some fuzz coverage for the S3 API. So I think it would be nice to use that in place of these S3 tests. What do people think about that?
Yeah, I mean, my plan is to take what he did and add it as a tautology test. And yeah, you have huge flexibility there to create all kind of bad inputs. So I think that that's a good idea. I'm not sure though that that's the only use of Bodo 2. I think at least in, if I'm not mistaken, in like any very old tests that were written, we didn't really, at least I didn't really check whether I'm using the Bodo 2 or Bodo 3 interfaces. For example, in bucket notifications tests, maybe even multi-site tests. So we could have all kind of rewrites that we need to do there.
You're talking about stuff outside of the S3 test repo though, right?
Yes, I'm talking about code inside
Yeah.
the Ceph. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I forget whether our initial testing against Ubuntu 24 showed failures in bucket notifications or multi-site, but yeah, that's worth investigating. In terms of S3 tests specifically, though, any strong objections to merging the PR that removes the Bodo 2 coverage? My understanding of the plan is that as soon as we cut the tentacle release, we're going to add those new distros to the supported distro matrix in Teuthology. So the RGW suite will start failing. So we're going to need a resolution sooner rather than later.
I mean, I'm fine with just removing the tests. I think a fuzzer is generally more useful than handcrafted invalid messages because you're not going to get very good coverage with the handcrafted stuff. But a fuzzer can test all kinds of boundary conditions much more thoroughly. So
yeah, that sounds right to me. Okay, well, my PR is stale and needs a rebase, but I will revisit that. Moving on to the next topic is about we've discussed moving the S3 tests repo into the Ceph repo in the past, and Adam couldn't make it today to talk about it, but I just wanted to link his work in progress there. Essentially a proof of concept to show that it can work. So I think this will solve a lot of headaches around the QA process, especially with backports. And then finally, Ragweed has the same Python version issue as S3 tests. Mark Kogan, don't think is on the call, but he used AI to essentially convert Ragweed to use Boto 3 instead. But the AI did it in a strange way, like adding a compatibility layer that makes the framework even more complicated. And given that we're running Ragweed, but we haven't added any interesting tests in many years and have just been maintaining it out of necessity. So I think it would probably be better to just give up on it now.
What kind of areas? Sorry, what kind of areas and cases of the code it is covering?
Good question. All that I really remember is that it had some, I think Yehuda invented it to validate upgrade cases around multi-part uploads. So like it has test cases with a prepare step that start a multi-part upload so that you can do that and then do an upgrade, and then a check step will complete the multi-part upload and make sure it worked. So like it's interesting coverage, but I think it was interesting for that specific feature development and is not really necessarily relevant anymore.
I mean, we run into the general case of backward compatibility during upgrades all the time. Like maybe with multiple upload, it's not an issue, but you know, with back notifications, with anything pretty much. So if this has sorry, some good framework for checking that, then I think this should be used. Maybe it could be simplified, or maybe it could be just part of the Ceph. I mean, I don't see why it requires a whole different repo just for some specific tests. But overall, you know, checking our backward compatibility after upgrades is something that we often need to do.
Yeah, I think upgrade testing in general needs a lot more attention. Like I made a RGW upgrade subsuite, but all that it does is run Ragweed, which I think is what it's for, but I think it's not giving us interesting test coverage. So if we remove Ragweed, then we would lose the upgrade suite. But I really think we should come up with a better model for upgrade testing.
Okay.
I mean, it sounds like this isn't necessarily a good framework for generic upgrade testing, but specifically for operations spanning across an upgrade. Right? This isn't backwards compatibility testing in any way. This is start an operation, do an upgrade, finish an operation, and make sure it works. Right.
Well, that latter point, I mean, one of the things that was useful conceptually about Ragweed, even though not many people wrote tests for it, is that it lets you run commands before, it's not limited to testing the S3 API. So you could build with it, test that check schema and other stuff that I think probably is relevant. Because you can make a case that we don't need a framework to do it. You can just do more tests. But for example, I mean, we wouldn't have been. It does seem like it's a place to put such tests
So
without writing a whole new suite.
So we have like two pretty large test suites that are not limited to S3. This is the multi-site test suite and the bucket notification test suite. Both of them are not part of S3 because they do lots of things that
Right, which is good, which is good stuff.
Right, and I guess I mean they're just using stuff. There's no framework there.
Understood, but I mean, okay, that's perfectly true, and I don't think there's very much in Ragweight, is my impression. So I don't remember what's the exact level of. Man, I remember looking at it. It was a long time ago that I looked at it, and I don't remember there being very much in it. But there is an argument, not so much that you need a whole big framework, but it's nice to, but it would be nice to encourage new tests that checked invariants outside the S3 API, and without having to create a whole new suite for it. Or maybe do you think that that's reasonable? Seems like it's more work. For large feature, you would do it, but for small things, it wouldn't be bad. It would be nice if there was just someplace to stick your test, perhaps. At least, I think that was the motivation for making it the way it is.
Yeah. I believe that it has support for Rados GW admin commands and the Rados Python bindings, so you can look directly at the Rados representation, and it can consume RGW admin APIs. So several things outside of S3 only. I just kind of wish that it was, I mean, the majority of the code there is the framework rather than the tests, which I think is part of the maintenance burden.
Yeah, if we don't have a pattern to put things in it, we're just carrying it.
Any volunteers here willing to own it and kind of make a plan to make it more useful, especially to replace the Bodo 2 stuff with Bodo 3?
So if we rewrote it, would it have to be rewritten in Python using Bodo 3?
No, certainly not.
Like it could be maybe in Golang and use Go Ceph or something for the Rados admin stuff. Maybe it wouldn't work. I don't know. I'm willing to look at it. I don't know if I have time to actually do it, a real job of it, but I'd like to remember what's all in it.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, the important coverage is specifically for upgrade testing. So maybe we could take a step back and try to think about from first principles what we want out of those kind of tests.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's different from the just we need intrusive tests.
Yeah, I mean, having a wrapper that runs Redux Gateway admin, it's pretty straightforward. It's like one Python function. You don't really need framework for that. But doing upgrades without deleting the data from the cluster, this is super interesting.
Okay, thanks for the feedback. I guess something to keep in mind. and it's going to come up soon when we start testing new distros in Toothology. All right, that's all I had on the test side. Eric, I see you want to discuss ordered indexing. Take it away.
Yeah, but more specifically, the current limitations of version buckets. There's a lot of background here, so I'll do my best to kind of quickly run through it. But currently, when we have a version bucket, the bucket index shards, hold the entries for all the different objects. There is a limitation, though, in that all the versions for a given object have to appear on the same bucket index shard. That's a design. That was a design limitation from the get-go, and the reason is that when we want to add a new version to an object, we have to create some sort of transaction where we have to keep the head object of the new version coordinated with the bucket index. Now, I provided a link here to a gist that has a lot of notes on how that's done, but basically the transaction is implemented on top of what we have access to in core. Now, currently, this can create issues for version buckets because we try and have at most 100,000 entries per shard for a given bucket. But there are cases where one particular object has many, many versions. Say somebody is writing it every so often to keep track of when the last time something was checked or something like that. They create more and more versions. And we often find the case where one shard is out of scale with all the other shards and can exceed the built-in limit of 100,000 entries that OMAP provides. And we never had really a good solution that we can reshard. But again, with our hashed indexing scheme, and the fact that all versions of a given object have to appear in the same shard, we don't always get things to divide evenly across the bucket indices. Now, I'm currently working on an implementation of an ordered bucket index scheme to replace the hash, or to sit alongside the hashed indexing scheme. And that offers some relief for this issue, but not complete relief. And when we keep things in our bucket indices and lexical ordering, resharding can actually be a local process where if one shard has too many entries, we can split it into 2 shards or 3 shards or whatever. And likewise, if a sequence of shards has very few entries among them, we can join them together into a single shard. If we imagine this process continuing over time on a version bucket, eventually we might end up where a single object is all on a given shard. All of the different versions are packed together in there, and other objects are on different shards. Now, again, we have $100,000 entry limit on OMAP, and every version of an object requires 2 entries. So that keeps us with a limit of around 50,000 versions for a given object. And we would like to exceed that. We would like to find a way around that. So that's the basic issue. A simple modification creates other issues. For example, we could imagine just having all the versions of a given object cross shard boundaries and sit on 2 or 3 or more consecutive shards. But the challenge then is when we want to add a new versioned object, we now have this more complicated transaction that would potentially run across 3 different objects: the head object, the bucket index object on which the object logical head is stored, and the bucket index object on which this particular version is stored. So perhaps we can deal with that in some way. Find an algorithm that will handle that particular situation, or maybe we have to start thinking about other possibilities as well. I don't know if I should just kind of leave it there or discuss some things that Matt and I have discussed or that I've been thinking about? Or is that enough just to spur some ideas?
Well, I think ordering helps. Um, so with versions of the same name, S3 requires that we list them from newest to oldest. I
Uh-huh.
think that's right.
Uh-huh.
So currently placement is just based on the name, and the ordering of keys, the ordering of versions is a detail of CLS RGW. But it seems like we would need to teach RGW to do that same placement so that we could have versions of the name span different objects.
Uh-huh.
The OLH entry, I believe, is just primarily to store the OLH log. And so if
Uh-huh.
we have versions spanning multiple objects, we could have an OLH log entry on each object. And as long as the entries in those shards are ordered, then we could reconstruct the ordering of the OLH log to replay it in the right order. Does that make sense?
I have to think about that a little bit more. So you're talking about, so every shard would have its own OLH.
Right.
If
So
we span multiple shards. So for a given object, we might have more than one OLH, one for each particular shard that it sits on.
Well, more than one OLH log. There's still an OLH object that points to the newest version, among other things. I think. At least that's my understanding.
Yeah, there's an indirect, I believe an indirect.
The original meaning of object logical OLH is object logical head, which means it's a head.
right, there's the OLH head object in the data pool, and there's a corresponding OLH entry in the bucket index, which stores the OLH log from the bucket index's perspective, and RGW replays that log to make the OLH head object consistent. So we would still have just the one OLH head object, but multiple OLH entries per shard to maintain the log.
Okay.
And I think since the shards are split, like if you have versions spanning 2 shards, they're at least ordered, so all of the newest ones are on one shard and the older ones are on the other. And so you would replay the old shards log entries first and then the new one.
So I'd have to think about that more, but that sounds very promising. I thought one other aspect of the OLH entry was to indicate which version is currently the top version, the version that's being referenced. And so clearly, well, what would but it's a stack of objects. We just can't go back in history and say like version 3 out of 100 is the new OLH, right? There's no mechanism for that. We'd have to literally delete all previous versions or all subsequent versions. Is that correct, Casey?
Sorry, I don't follow. You're talking about within the index, or?
Yeah. So our operations are adding new versions or deleting existing versions, either by adding a delete marker or by targeting a specific version and deleting that specifically. Correct? Those are the 3 basic
Yes.
operations.
Right.
So we just can't go back in time and say we have versions 1 through 100, but for some reason we want to make version 3 be the OLH for now, or the, right?
I see, right. Yeah, deletes are tricky.
Yeah.
I would hope that we could kind of just treat each OLH index entry as local to its shard.
Uh-huh.
And like if we would assume that the the first shard is the one with the newest entries, and so we would generally look at that one for current version.
Right. Uh-huh.
But if we deleted all of the entries from that, then maybe that OLH entry would say empty, and so we would fall back to the next one and maybe the next one after.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, this is sounding promising because it allows us to maintain our current transaction mechanism. Just got to make sure that, yeah, as we delete versions, we're cleaning things up appropriately. I like this idea.
One tricky thing about the placement function in general, though, is the ordering from oldest or newest to oldest has to know the OLH epoch. That's one of the data dependencies for the placement function. So you would need the object name, the instance ID, and the epoch to figure out what shard you need to talk to.
Got it. That I'm gonna have to do some more research on.
For writes, we recently changed OLH epochs to use M times. So I think that helps for writes. We know the M time. Well, shoot. We know the M time when we write the head object. So we wouldn't know it when we do the prepare. Yeah, I think that needs more thought. I mean, for versioned objects, it's not just the bucket index transaction with the prepare, writing the head object, and the complete. There's also the link OLH, which comes later.
Uh-huh. And that's the one that modifies the pointer, the indirect object in the data pool.
Link OLH happens on the bucket index, and I think that's what writes the OLH entries that
Got it.
eventually get replayed on RGW.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I mean, ultimately we need all of the index operations for a given version to go to the same shard. And if we don't know the OLH epoch ahead of time, that's tough.
When you say
Currently we're
replay,
using the M time, but
uh-huh.
maybe we would need to generate a timestamp before the prepare happens.
Uh-huh.
But that, I think that changes the semantics of it.
Got it. And when you say replay, is this in reference to multi-site?
No, this is RGW Rados has an update OLH function, which lists the OLH log for a name and calls apply OLH log in a loop. So we do this after processing new writes or deletes.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Okay. So this is part of the transactional mechanism then. Okay.
Also, I believe the link OLH gets written into the bylog for the shard, and that bylog gets replicated, pulled in by the other zone, and then replayed there, right?
Correct.
There are a couple of questions in the chat.
Oh, let me hold on. I didn't have the chat up. Um, So someone's asking whether to just put the limit on 50,000 versions per object. Is that
Like there's an existing tracker that asks for like limiting the number of versions per object. So if that has precedence over this one, like this problem comes a lower priority issue, right? That's my understanding. But yeah, I think you're working on that one too, as far as I understand.
Yeah, I haven't touched it in a long time. I'm trying to remember the history of this one.
I mean, I think the problem is more that people want to have more than 50,000 versions, and we can't really support it right now, right? And so if we put in a limit, yes, that would stop them from hitting the problems that are caused, but it wouldn't allow them to go to the scale to the lip points that they want to.
Yeah, that's the thing.
So I think both are good fixes. I mean, we probably do want a configurable limit, but we also want to be able to support, you know, quote unquote unlimited number of versions.
Yes, sometimes users do want to exit that limit. Sometimes they exit the limit without knowing it, like LC doesn't work under the hood. They just keep writing versions and LC is not working for some other reasons, and it keeps growing without users noticing, although they don't want to have that many versions in their bucket. Yeah, you're right. Sometimes in some use cases, some clients may want to exit that limit, but from our understanding, those use cases are rare generally. They're accidentally exiting that limit. So that's why I was like saying maybe limiting with a configurable item would be a higher precedence. But then we can come to this solution for some rare use cases. Yeah, if some clients wants to exit that limit, how we can accommodate it and make it more efficient.
Yeah, and I think even if we choose something like 50,000 as a default limit, that's still
Also, what should happen if you violate it? The new upload should be forbidden.
I'm guessing like a quota exited sort of error. Can't make it even, but
So, I have no objection to figuring out a solution or an approach to doing that. But I think basically the expectation. I think there's a fundamental expectation that the storage system supporting versioning doesn't fix a number of versions that is the upper limit any more than a file system typically fixes fixes a low and a small and finite number for the number of objects you can or files you can create. I mean, there's a limit in practice, but it's impossibly large in the generic sense these days. So it's never seemed as satisfactory to have a fixed limit that you could imagine hitting easily.
yeah, and going back to the idea about needing to reject new writes if we're over some limit. Currently, I don't think we would even know that until we do a link OLH, which is after the transaction is already finished. So it may require an additional index operation beforehand, which would be expensive, or somehow changing the prepare. And if we are going to do ordered indexing and spreading keys across different objects, it becomes harder to impose a limit across objects than in the same.
So I need to do some research. I'm really intrigued by your idea, Casey, but I need to understand better the role the epoch plays in determining which shards something each entry is placed on. So I may want to have another discussion or review the code just to kind of see what's going on there.
Yeah, so just as a starting point, that's the function in CLS RGW that needs OLH epoch to generate the OMAP key, and it's the sort order of those OMAP keys that controls the order we return to S3 list object versions.
Okay. All right, that's a good starting point. Thanks. Any other thoughts or ideas or questions? Anyone?
As for the version epoch, we currently switch to the timestamp. So as soon as we take the M modification time for the new object version, we know what the epoch is, because that's basically what it is. It's the M time. So I do not know if that's available before prepare. I'm not sure. My guess is that
So Igor, if you're still talking, you're
No, I finished.
okay.
No, I'm just saying that epoch is basically M time for a new object version.
Uh-huh.
So if we have that before prepare, then we can use it.
Got it.
Right, but the prepare happens before we write the head object. So for writes, there would be no M time yet.
I just wanted to mention it because I wasn't sure.
And I assume we don't have control over the M time. We just have to take whatever Rados assigns it.
So when you write an object, you can use object operation. I think there's a set M time, so you absolutely can overwrite the M time instead of just having Rados use the current time.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. Anything else anyone would like to add or ask questions on? Well, thank you. I appreciate everyone's thoughts and input.
Thank you, Eric. And Igor, it's wonderful to have another expert on object versioning. Really helpful.
I'll do my best.
All right. Any other topics for today? Okay, then. Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.